Hey everybody, welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. Today I have with me Eradandis.
Hello there.
I also have TheSoulution.
Hello, everyone.
And today we are going to be talking about LitRPG/Progression Fantasy, just as a general genre, how we like it, what we don't, some good examples, maybe some bad. We'll see. It promises to be hopefully a great learning experience and a good discussion for everybody. So let's just start off with it. What is lit RPG to you guys? When you hear that, what do you think?
So I was completely new to this when you guys invited me onto it. So when I first heard it, I thought we were talking about just general RPG games, whether tabletop or otherwise, videos that were then converted into books. So I was thinking, oh, look, they're talking about the Dungeons and Dragons books and Shadowrun and Warhammer and all this other stuff, but that was not the case, as it turns out. So that was my first thought.
That's great. And what about you, Solution?
Similar, actually. Before I even got into any lit RPG, I had a similar thought, but I hadn't actually read any D&D books or anything like Shadowrun and is it Legend of Drizzt? I don't know how to say that name, but something like that. But then eventually I got into one of the more popular series of lit RPGs, like Sufficiently Advanced Magic, the Arcane Ascension series, and a few others.
Sounds great. Yeah. I just found some lit RPG books and started reading them, and I had a good time. So I kind of looked into it a little more, what they were. I enjoy them. If you wanted a little bit more technical definition, a lit RPG stands for like a literal or a literary role-playing game. Usually just trying to combine the best of computer RPGs or RPG games with science fiction fantasy novels. Kind of started around 2013, but as genres go, they wax and wane. You can't place a pin in it and say this is exactly when it started. So let's start off with some questions. What are aspects that you do like, you don't like about this genre? Let's start with you, Solution, this time.
I personally like the progress that's being made, usually by the main character or everybody that's on their team or whoever they got with them. I find it personally motivating that, not to be like in anime, to be like a Super Saiyan or something really high level. It's mostly just to be, healthy, not to really give up at the first sign of trouble, like, oh, my neck hurts. Okay, well, don't give up. Wait a little bit and then get better and, do it again. My dislikes is there's a lot of stats you got to keep track of for some of the lit RPG stuff. So, what about you guys?
True. What about you, Eradandis?
Well, so I got a list. So let me go through it. So for reasons I like it is, if I just want to read it and just turn my brain off, it's perfect for that. It's just pure escapism, mindless fun. It's just sometimes you just want to read a book about punching people, and these books are perfect for that. The second thing is, the second reason I like it actually has more to do with my love for RPGs in general. I like reading those player manuals or kind of opening up a new video game and kind of reading that inside cover as to what buttons you have to use or anything like that. So when I read these books and I look at it from that perspective, is this a manual on how to play this video game? I actually get some more enjoyment out of that itself. Another reason I like it is the meta-textual context that you're using, because sometimes you'll read and you'll have HP with a number, right? That makes me laugh. That provides humor to me, and I like it. But I have to candidly admit that I don't have the best understanding of this, and I think this genre, part of it's generational, and I'm the old man yelling at you guys to get off my lawn. And I feel that's very true because, I was talking to my son who's 12 about these books, and he's like, "Oh yeah, and I watch YouTube with videos of Apex Legends," and so we spent hours talking about that. But it's something that's totally part of his culture, and it's not a part of mine. So I know I'm missing a part of the fun of the lit RPG. Now I do have reasons I don't like it. Those are just my reasons to like it. So, so for the reasons I don't like it, Look, I love video games. I grew up playing Knights of the Old Republic and Halo, and I still play FIFA and Madden. Love all those games. But the fun in video games for me comes from three ingredients: fun story, great visuals, and then the interaction, whether it's with the controller or with other people. And for LitRPG, I feel like you're removing two of those three necessary components, and you're heavily relying on the story aspect of it. So I think you're missing that part of it from the video game, and I always feel that when I'm reading these books. The second thing, and mind you, I've only read 2 LitRPG novels, so this just may be in context for those novels, but I always felt the characters are shallow. Kind of like in a video game, where it's all about progressing. It's not necessarily about any moral aspect of it. I actually made myself laugh hysterically reading one of the books you guys recommended, because the character's name, I mean, we've all done this. Like, you name your character. I'm going to name my character something lewd, right? And then you sit there and just read it the whole time. You laugh yourself hysterically. So I kind of felt it was a little bit shallow. And then the last thing, which is kind of metatextual, is that I think LitRPG kind of reverses the normal process for the way these books are created. Normally, you have the successful video game, and then you make it into a novel. You don't usually make the novel and then convert it into the video game necessarily. You do sometimes, but it's the other way around usually, as far as I can tell. Anyway, that's my very long-winded version of what I like and don't like.
That's okay. It's good to have opinions. If I remember them in a few minutes, I'll push back on them. But what I like about them, I like the constant progress. I like that a lot of them, they have very simple, small things. Like in a couple I've read, there's like a small quest system that they have to do every day, and it's never anything over the top. It's do 10 push-ups, run a mile, etc. And that just kind of can show that even the small things can contribute to your level, per se, as a human overall, right? I have to agree and disagree with both of you guys. I like sometimes all the stats, as long as it's not too much. When I have to read big blocks of text, that sometimes will push me out, or if it's too complicated to understand, I'll just skim that stuff. But like you said, Eradandis, they really are sometimes just like turn your brain off and just enjoy the story. They live mostly on a level 1 plane for the Legendarium's rating. But occasionally I think you can find some level 2, some level 3 thoughts inside of them. You might have to dig a little deeper, and it really depends on the book. But I think it's possible to find them. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to say about that? If we just move on.
I think we can move on. We got our main likes and dislikes out of the way, I think.
Okay. Let's say what some favorite books of these two subgenres, if you have any, or your least favorite books if you really didn't like any of the ones you've read recently. I can start with this one. For Lit RPG, it's more of a progression fantasy. You have the Cradle series by Will White, a very excellent example. Sometimes it can be a little tough if it's the first time you've ever read it, but I think that one gives a great example of a very weak character progressing and growing stronger over time. The story's excellent. The characters in that one I think are excellent. Lit RPG side, I would say sufficiently advanced magic. Just enough relevant details to make you think Lit RPG, the stats, kind of like the magic, but then more of a story, enough of a story to keep you engaged and thinking. What about you guys?
Soul?
Actually, those are my 2 absolute favorites of the genre. Cradle, I wanted to touch on just real quick. You mentioned the characters on it. I wanted to say the scale. The scale he does, I think, is probably the best in the genre I've seen, where he always makes it feel like the character is advancing, but it's not necessarily he's a god among men. There's always another scale to get to, but he doesn't make it so far ahead that it's unreachable for his characters. So
Yeah.
I do like that.
That is one issue that sometimes I have with them, is that, at least with the progression fantasy, is that your character feels like he's on an endless loop, He gets stronger, he defeats the bad guy, then he gets to the next place and he's the weakest guy. And then he gets stronger and he defeats the bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
and he gets back to the weakest character again, just over and over. But yeah, keep going then, sorry.
No, you're good. Sufficiently Advanced Magic, their Arcane Ascension series, also very good. I feel like they don't put too many stats in. That's one of the reasons why I probably like it the most. He has, like you said, just enough. Mostly the mana, gauging the mana and all that. But it's still progression. So it's not just a lit RPG series. There is progression as far as tracking how far into the magic system one gets. I did want to throw out Mage Errant by John Bierce. He has, I believe, 4 books now. They're friends with Andrew Rowe, the one who wrote Arcane Ascension series, and he took a lot of elements from that and has his own stories. Very good. And Mother of Learning, which I cannot pronounce the author's name. He started it as a web serial, and I believe he still did. He wanted to make it into a book, but for now it's just a web serial. You can find it online for free. And that's another Groundhog's Day-ish series. It's pretty
Yeah, month-long Groundhog Day story.
good. Yeah.
Very good. I've read it. Be warned, though, it is a long book.
It is long. And I don't believe the author is a native speaker of English, so there are a lot of typos and errors, but they try to correct them, but for the most part that is still in the story.
So I'm not a huge fan of these books, but I'll do what I can. So for progression RPG, I'm gonna stick with the Cradle series that you guys talked about. I read it twice. Okay, the first time I did not like it at all. I was just bored. But then I read it a second time, and I put on a different hat. And I'm like, so what is it like? If I was like a kid reading this, what would appeal to me about it? And to me, it's that wish fulfillment aspect. So I kind of read it from that kind of like wonder, or hell, like in the 50s and 60s, people would read those romance novels a lot, right? To get that wish fulfillment, right? So I read Unsold, the first book in the Cradle series, from that perspective, and I enjoyed it more. Mind you, it wasn't my favorite, but I enjoyed it more. And then for Lit RPG, the book I've read is called Awaken Online by Travis Bagwell. Awaken Online, and I won't talk much about the story itself, but what I do like about it is the way there's first a demarcation between your real life and then your online persona. And then there's the bleeding in between one to the other. And actually, I think that's actually a powerful storytelling device. And I think it can be used successfully. And I guess one of my questions I had for you guys is, and I wasn't able to find this out one way or the other, are these books mostly self-published, or are they just, or they have, I couldn't figure that one out.
I think personally on the majority side of things, they are self-published. That isn't to say that nobody wouldn't publish them. I just think that originally they start out more as a self-published kind of a thing.
Well, I think one of the I'm gonna use air quotes weaknesses that I see in the genre, and that's not to say that it won't be cured in the future, but sometimes an author transcends the genre. Like they're good enough that the genre is not necessarily a limitation to them. They use it to then be able to tell their own story. And at least in the books I've read so far, the authors seem to be writing within the genre instead of kind of creating their own story out of it. And I don't know whether you guys have read more of it than I have, so I don't know whether you guys have an author in mind that may fit that criteria.
Not off the top of my head, but I have to just say that I think a lot of them that I've read are more like weekly things, or they're like the web novels that you can just read online a week at a time, a chapter at a time. And that just produces a slightly different story than when you're reading it all in one time at a book. I mean, you can take breaks with the book, of course, but you still have it all in one place. You're not waiting week to week. It's a different little style. I think some authors can transcend it, but I think you're right. Most of them just kind of, they follow the box, which is not a bad box if that's what you like.
Agree, absolutely. I was just trying to try to put in context. I guess you're saying is, I guess they write it more like comic books. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Okay. I mean, look, comic books are fun. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I think it's important when you're kind of diving into a genre, is to kind of have an idea of how these books are being written, because that'll give you context of what you're looking at when you're reading it.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thumbs up for that. I agree. It's a unique storytelling device. But let's move on to our next topic here, you guys. Our next one is: do these books, or do you think that these books have anything in common with other types of RPG novels, like the Shadowrun, D&D, Forgotten Realms, all those? Yes, no. What makes it better, worse? Why don't we start with you, Eradandis? I know you have some strong opinions here.
So I do think, well, I think that given that LitRPG is supposed to be the video game version of it, I guess, and there's always that separation between reality and online. And to me, that is one of the biggest differences between them, is that you have the online version and then the reality version. The other difference is that LitRPG is much more willing to rely on the metatextual context, the stats and the numbers and all that stuff. Having said that, I think the tabletop RPGs are a direct parent or to this lit RPG. And Soul, you mentioned the Drizzt series, the Icewind Dale trilogy. It's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. If you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or the Forgotten Realms at all, I'll just give you one example out of one of the books to kind of explain what I'm talking about. Early in the journey, there's a group of adventurers, there's the outcast dark elf ranger, a barbarian friend, a dwarf, and all that stuff. And they're going on this adventure, and they're going to another town, and they have to cross through the troll moors. Anybody who's familiar with Dungeons and Dragons knows that you don't want to mess with trolls unless you have fire with you, right? Because the trolls keep on regenerating and they keep on sprouting new limbs. Well, in the book, they go through this great big, it's a huge, couple chapters where they talk about how they're smashing the trolls into little bits and they're yelling at each other to get the fire ready while another one's keeping on beating up on the trolls and stuff. So if you don't have any context for the tabletop for the Forgotten Realms, you're like, okay, this is kind of silly, whatever. But if you know the rules, you know what's going on. Oh, I get it. That's fun. I've done that too in my own campaigns, and it creates an extra level. So, anyways, very long-winded way of saying I think that these tabletop RPGs are the direct predecessor. They're what they did before the lit RPG. And I think the main difference is in the tabletop RPGs, you mostly you're in that world. You're in that world, and it's not. There's no reality. The reality is the world that they're living in.
Perfect. Solution, what do you think?
I really don't have too much experience with those novels. I'm definitely interested, especially now after Eradandis' explanation of The Legend of Drizzt. So, mostly classes, I would want to say, probably paladin, rangers, sorcerers. I know they derive a lot from D&D, and they bring a lot of that into lit RPG and what they use as far as their roles, I guess.
And Chesky,
Yeah.
I want to add one more thing.
Sure, go ahead.
And you can see this in a lot of these tabletop RPGs. And I'm going to use again the Icewind Dale trilogy. And this relates directly to the progression RPG. And I think there's 20 something Drizzt books. After about the second or third book, every single book, Drizzt is faced with some insurmountable odds, or he's facing some superb fighter with a new technique that he's never seen before. And in every single book, there's a chapter where he has this stunning breakthrough, where he's able to achieve some higher level of mastery of the sword, and all of a sudden he's able to win. And you see that in every single book, and I feel like it's a direct through line that you see in these progression RPGs, tabletop or current.
Oh yeah, that I definitely agree with you there. I also think that these RPG novels, I've read a couple, not a ton, but I definitely think that they are the spiritual and physical parents of what a lit RPG book is. It's like taking a Dungeons and Dragons game and just putting it into a book and telling the user, the reader, everything that's going on. One thing that I think they kind of have in common as well, besides what we've already talked about, is there's in a lot of them there's some kind of a system or a control that only the main character can see, or at least in some of the ones I've read, where they can see, oh, my quest is go do this, and that is really similar to D&D, where your character, as a player, like, oh, my quest is to go clean out the camp, but your character has to figure out a way to, why would you want to go out there? It's scary, like you could die, But that's something that the lit RPG does, is kind of shows you as if your character was a D&D player. What's he gonna do? How's he gonna choose to do that? I liked it a lot. I just actually had this thought while you were talking. Lit RPG. Here's a common one that maybe you didn't think about, but Ready Player One, which the Legendarium covered, would technically be like a lit RPG. He does grow in level when he's in that online world. Kind of another one. So that's just a thought. But yeah, I like that. Let's move on. Unless you guys have anything else you wanted to add. No? Okay. Similarities between reading lit RPG and watching people play video games. Eradandis, you suggested this. What do you want to talk about here?
Well, I'd really like to hear y'all's thoughts first, because I feel like I'm that. It goes back to my very first point of I feel like it's a get off my lawn moment, because I don't understand the fun in watching people play video games. I really, really don't. I've sat and watched my son for hours, like a personal diversion. So we went on vacation. When we get back from vacation, we have hardwood floors and they're trashed because there's a water leak. So we were in a hotel for 6 weeks, God bless. So I was in the room with my son every night, right? And there's this, he watched constantly this guy named Laserbeam. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Anyways, Laserbeam and Fortnite. And it was just a constant stream of watching this guy play and commenting on it. And I wanted to blow my brains out by the end of my time there. I don't understand the fun. I just don't get it. So I'm sorry. I'm gonna turn it over to you guys.
I'm laughing over here. It looks like Solution is as well. Solution, do you want to go first, or do you want me to take this?
You can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry you had such a horrible experience with that, Eradandis. I don't know. I don't know if I see a lot of similarities between reading lit RPG and watching people play video games. As somebody who has it on in the background quite a lot, or even in the active ground quite a lot, I enjoy watching people play the games that I can't, the games that I'm not good enough to play, the games that I'm too poor to buy or too cheap to buy, whichever route you want to go with that. They're usually a lot better at it, and they can do more things, and I get the same enjoyment as if I was playing it. And then there's always that connection that you can feel, that you can have with whoever is broadcasting it. I could see it a little bit between reading it and watching people play it. If they're playing an RPG game, you can kind of see it more. They're talking about their decisions, they're explaining things, but not a huge connection for me, but a small one.
I actually really liked the question when you brought it up, because my first thought was yes. To me, it was. What you were just talking about, Chesky, is that games that are too tough. Like me, I'm not the best gamer. I'd say I'm average, but there's certain games that I find myself being too frustrated, like Dark Souls, for example. The series, really cool lore that doesn't really throw it in your face. You have to go and search for it. It's really nice and definitely a neat aspect of their storytelling. I watch one of the guys is a streamer called Fighting Cowboy. You can watch his videos on YouTube, and I think you might like that a little bit better than Fortnite, as far as you get to see a story. He makes his own decisions. He'll talk with the the people that are viewing and be like, all right, look, we're gonna go for a warrior build, and we want to do this, and we make these decisions, and he works it out with you as a crowd. It's interesting. I don't really watch too many streams, but definitely for games that are too difficult, or maybe I'll watch. It's called a let's play. Somebody's starting the game through the campaign. I'll be like, okay, do I want to spend my money on this game? So I'll do a little research. I'll watch the first episode or two of these people going through. And I think that's very similar as far as audio and visual of like a novel. Because to me, they're speaking to me, they're trying to work out their storyline. So I'm seeing all this stuff. It's just, I'm not reading it. So it kind of feels similar. I'd never thought about it that way.
And I think that's a good point because, I'm dragging my son into this. He doesn't know it, but, like he explained all this stuff to me about what you guys are talking about with YouTube and watching video games. So I threw Unsold at him after I was done reading it. And I'm like, hey, what do you think about it? He loved it. He does not like fantasy much. He loved that book. And I mean, his first word to me, I felt like I was reading a video game. Those were his words. So there's a connection there that I'm obviously missing. So that was the genesis of the question, because there's some connection that he's making to playing or watching video games with these books.
Yeah. I think you definitely could feel that when you're reading it. I would definitely agree with him that reading these sometimes feels like you're reading a video game. You're reading the characters make, hopefully for the most part, they're correct decisions. They're usually, I would say, pretty optimistic near the end. You're always going to triumph, or most likely you're always going to triumph. But, it's a book, so sometimes bad stuff has to happen for that conflict to happen. So, all right. Did you want to ask any other questions? Did we want to talk about that more, or should we go to our audience questions?
We can go.
Let's try audience questions.
Yeah.
Audience questions it is. Okay. Let's see. Have any of you guys read Rage of Dragons?
Yes.
All right, then this one is for you.
Okay.
Would you consider it to be progression fantasy?
Yes, I would. There is, it's not as clearly defined as one of the main points of the genre. I wouldn't say the magic system is effectively stages, but there's definitely progression. You can see the character developing more skills, and you can clearly define when he does that and what his methods of training and how he does that.
Cool. Great. Here in Fan, that's one of your questions. And you had a second one. What would we regard as the best literature of the genre? I would say I think Cradle is one of the best examples of this. I think we've all read it. We all at least mostly liked it or partially liked it for Eradandis.
Yeah. Is there another example maybe besides? I mean, it was fine, but is there? I mean, what about that sufficiently advanced magic you guys talked about before? You think Cradle's better than that?
I think they're two sides of the same coin, where we have progression fantasy is Cradle, because you're going through these stages. There's not as many stats. There's actually really almost no stats. But on that other side is the Arcane Ascension, where there is progression, but there is also stats. So I really think that's more, I don't even consider Cradle lit RPG. I would think Arcane Ascension is. And it's well written. If you need another reason to read it, it's also very LGBTQ friendly. The author is really into that. He's really open-minded. He does a lot of cool stuff with his story, and he connects some of his previous works with his current works as well.
I would have to agree. They're both of those are pretty good. I've really enjoyed them. I don't have any other real ones. I haven't read a ton of them, and the ones I have are not finished, and I don't want to recommend them until I see how they go. Because as I said, there's a lot of those web novel ones, and I read a lot of those, unfortunately. So
I'm in the same boat. I don't have too many to recommend that are finished, like you said. I don't want to throw that out there, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I've read Awaken Online, which I did finish. I think it's 9 books, 1,000. I want to say it's about 1,000 pages total. I don't know. I'd recommend it as the best in the genre, but it's worth a read. I mean, it starts off, the premise is that there's a kid who, for all purposes, you think he'd at least be happy. He's got successful parents. He goes to good school, but he's bullied, and his parents ignore him. and his outlet is playing this new video game. And it's kind of that story and how those two versions of himself interact. So, I mean, it's YA for sure, but if that's your thing, then, I mean, it's worth a read.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't read it, but I'll put it on my list, my ever growing TBR list. What do you guys think is one of the primary reasons that people are attracted to this subgenre? That's from Kipton.
I said it before, wish fulfillment.
That's a good one. Soul, do you have any thoughts? Or
Yeah, I would say that's a main thing. A lot of, I think it's generational, like you said. I grew up with a lot of anime, like Dragon Ball Z and all these other shonen is technically the subgenre within anime. And a lot of that translates to the progression fantasy. And I want to actually touch on the topic of, you mentioned earlier, they write their books in web serial form. I feel like they do that because that's the way they've seen it. Like you said, it's in mangas, it's in animes, they're weekly formats. So they want to continue that trend because also I believe the mentality that these people that want to write this kind of fantasy are the people that don't mind starting at the beginning. They don't mind being not the best writer and they want to start. So they will. And they're just going to throw out, a chapter a week. And I think that's just the kind of audience that draws in is also the writers.
Yeah, I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with writing it, a chapter or however much of a week at a time. It can keep you relevant and keep people excited to keep coming back, of course. I think people are attracted to this because there's a bunch of reasons. Like you guys said, there's that wish fulfillment. The main character becomes the strongest. They can do anything. There's the general progression, just going from weak. Everybody enjoys watching somebody who's weak and pushed on or bullied or teased and going to the strong person who would usually be protecting the people that they were in their past, that they didn't have anybody to help them, and now he's that person to help other people. I think people like that a lot, and like we said earlier, it's a heavily level 1 kind of story. You get in it for the punch-in, for the excitement, for the action. The story's there, and that's good, but it's just to have a good time. And what else can you ask for in a book than to have a good time? Besides, other things in books, but you know what I'm saying. Let's see. Little Red Book asked us, what sort of reader would we recommend this subgenre to? If you like this book series, then you'll probably like more in this genre, per se. What do you guys think?
I think young adults for sure. I think just in terms of age, young adults for sure. Like I think these are YA novels through and through, and I don't say that as something negative. That's just that's kind of the category they fit in. Because I think especially people that are starting off on something new, a new journey, new life, whatever it is, it's a good fit for them.
Yeah,
I agree.
Solution, what do you think?
I would say maybe less is about books, but if people enjoy animes or if they grew up with watching anime, they might enjoy it. It's worth looking into, I would say. Actually, there's a subreddit for Progression Fantasy, of course. There's a subreddit for everything. They actually mentioned that Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. It's not labeled Progression Fantasy. It's not something that it's marketed towards. But in that subreddit, they consider it a Progression Fantasy loosely because there are stages of the magic system. And I won't go into spoilers other than that. So that's it. But there's literature out there that is not as it's not as clearly defined as progression fantasy. So there's certain things, if you find yourself reading a book that maybe you're interested in stages of magic or progressing more and more, then give it a shot.
Sounds good. I think the person I would recommend this to would be the kind of reader who mainly reads just to read. If you get too nitpicky in the details of the book, this grammar doesn't make sense. I see Eradandis pointing to himself. He's saying that's him for sure. If you get too into the nitty gritty, well, that doesn't make any sense. And why would you say it like this when it sounds prettier if you say it like this? It's not going to be your thing. But if you just want to read, you have a good time. I was looking at a list of lit RPG over the week, and one of them is Orconomics by J. Zachary Pike. It's a fun book. It is much more a satirical book about what would happen if Dungeons and Dragons was real life. And that's kind of like, so it's a fun book. That's who I'd recommend it to, is people who enjoy it, people who like it. Just, they're willing to look aside. They're willing to get invested in it. That's it. You guys have any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I recommend 2 series? Because I'm an old man, so I can recommend some older books.
Go ahead.
That are adult versions of this. And so the first one I want to recommend is The Guardians of the Flame. It's a series by Joel Rosenberg. Everybody's forgotten this series, but it's a pretty fun series. It starts off with a group of people getting together to go play Dungeons and Dragons. And their dungeon master kind of sets them on this journey to do this. And the dungeon master ends up transporting them in a portal fantasy to the world that they were playing Dungeons and Dragons in. And they're all inhabiting the bodies of the characters that they were playing. And it's their story of what happens. Some live, some don't. One of the major tenets of that world is that it's a world where slavery is a big deal in that world, and it's their journey to stop that. So it's a fun series if you guys would like to give that a try. And the other one I would recommend, which has been recommended on the Legendarium before, but this is another book. It's based on an actor. And in that book, the actor travels from a dystopian sci-fi real world to a magical version of that planet. And the actor goes on adventures in the magical world, and those adventures are transmitted as video entertainment in his home world. So it's a version of that lit RPG. The book is called Heroes Die by Matthew Woodring Stover. You better be an adult to read it, though. It is not YA in the least, but it is a fantastic novel.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for recommending those. Do you guys have any other final thoughts or thoughts that you wanted to talk more about? Arguments you wanted to get into really quick? No. Okay.
I don't pick fights with Eradandis. So.
Oh, come on. So I was actually curious why you guys so one of the things I said that I did like was, I was talking about video games and how much I did like them. What were your thoughts? I really do think that lit RPG kind of removes 2 of the main fun things about video games, and I really think that kind of undercuts the genre. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Just in saying that because they're so heavily modeled after video games, that's undercutting what they can be or what they are?
I think so, because if you're relying just on the story element itself, so you don't have any visuals, and you're not relying on the controller, you're not talking to people when you're playing, it's literally just the story. I mean, my opinion, you better be an excellent writer to give that a try, because otherwise, I mean, they become generic, for lack of a better word. And I'm not trying to put down the genre, but they've set themselves up a really difficult task. They're like, we're going to make this as difficult as possible. Now, right, and so I don't know what the future of this genre is, given that limitation. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I just want to put it out there that you're wrong. I don't know what about, but you're somewhere in there. You're wrong.
No, I'll agree. Definitely wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one way that they, like you said, that interaction between person and controller or person and other people that you would get in games, that I still feel like you would get that interaction whether you're reading it in a book. But as we said, a lot of them are released as, chapter a week type stories. And that is one way of interacting with the reader. Sometimes they'll put footnotes or headers and just saying here's the next chapter. The next one should be out in a week. And I think that can give you that interaction, maybe less so than a video game would, but you could still have that interaction there.
And going off of the interaction, with that weekly, release schedule, you're getting a lot of interaction between other people that are also reading along with you. There's a web serial I want to plug, Worm by Wildbow. Very good. Not progression or literary RPG at all, but it's what I would consider top tier of the web serial format. He's been doing it for years. He's a good author. And the fan base for these series is really interesting because they all talk together, they speculate. That's their involvement to them. So instead of actually playing together, they're reading and then they're discussing it, almost how we do in the Discord for Legendarium.
One quantifier for Worm, though. I said that Mother of Learning was long. Worm puts nearly all books to shame.
Yes.
It's incredibly long, but good. Very good.
Yeah.
Just know that it's long. Don't get into it lightly, or read smaller sections of it at a time.
I believe just the first book of Worm, which there's other books that he wrote, but Worm itself is 1.8 million words total, I want to say. I know it's above a million, and it's very long.
Yeah. But that's a discussion for another time. Maybe if we feel crazy enough, we'll all read Worm together and talk about it someday. I just thumbs up. Let us know if you think we should or shouldn't read Worm and discuss it online, and if we should force Eradandis to read it with us.
Hey, we're doing Unsold, right?
Yeah, yes, that is definitely coming down the track sometime.
Okay.
And I'll reserve the rest of my comments for Unsold.
If you guys have any closing thoughts, I'll just put us out. Anything, you guys? No? Okay. Thanks for joining us. That was great to have me, Ceskykure, Eradandis, and TheSoulution talking today about lit progression and lit RPG and progression fantasy. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you had a good time. I would like to thank Horizon Brave for getting us started with this. And have a good day, guys.